Hi, everyone. Welcome to another amazing session. We are super excited that you decided to join us. And today we have with us Sara McBryde. She has presented for us several times, and she always has an outstanding presentation. So I know that you are going to like this. Sara received a Bachelor of Science in Interdisciplinary Studies with an emphasis in early childhood and reading education from Texas A&M University. She also holds a Master of Education in Reading Education with an emphasis in children's literature from Texas Women's University. Her teaching certifications include elementary, pre-K through 6th, and reading specialist EC through 12th. Her professional experiences include preschool and elementary classroom teaching assignments, RTI specialist, and writing district curriculum, which is amazing. Sara, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right, next slide, please. All right, this is just a disclaimer stating that an online degree from UAGC does not lead to immediate teacher licensure. So if you were to get a degree here, you do have to go back to your individual state and apply for certification and licensure. Next slide, please. And this is also a disclaimer that just says UAGC does not warrant anything that is shared in this presentation and or the pictures or links provided. So Sara, thank you so much, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Today, we're going to talk about developmentally appropriate practice in the early childhood classroom. And you may be asking, well, what is developmentally appropriate practice? I've heard about it. It's a big buzzword. It's heard all over teacher trainings and in college classrooms. And so we're just going to really kind of focus on just a little piece of it today. It's a very broad term and it encompasses a lot of information, but we're just going to kind of hit on it a little bit today, and hopefully you'll be able to take away some fun things to apply in your own classroom and work with children. So first, let's go ahead and look at what is developmentally appropriate practice. It refers to providing instruction and activities that correlate with the child's development through engaged learning. The NAEYC, which is the National Association for the Education of Young Children, defines it as or recognizes it as it supports each individual as a valued member of the learning community. So that means each child feels like they are a part of that classroom. And as a result, to be developmentally appropriate, practices must be culturally, linguistically, and ability appropriate for each child. So it's a research-based position statement published by the NAEYC, and it's widely referred to in college courses and teacher trainings as an effective research-based practice for instruction. And this is for children all around the world. And to put it in a summarized fashion, developmentally appropriate practice, or as we'll refer to it from now on as DAP, is the foundation for early learning experiences. When you're engaging in DAP, you're creating lessons and activities based on what you know your students want to know and how they learn. And you're just really getting to know them individually and meeting their individual needs. This combination of knowing your students and best practices in teaching allows you to facilitate an individualized learning experience. And that's how children learn, is when you're able to meet them where they are and take them forward. And each child, that's going to look different. And so DAP provides the foundation to be able to provide that individualized instruction. Now here on the NAEYC website, you'll see that they have a position statement. And you'll notice over on the right-hand side, there are some words that have underline and bullet points. And each of those are great links to click on, because they will go more in depth into what the NAEYC believes DAP is about. But I'll quickly read this little section here that says that each and every child birth through age 8 has the right to an equitable learning opportunity in centers, family child care homes, or schools that fully support their optimal development and learning across all domains and content areas. Children are born eager to learn, and I think we've seen that. I think we know they come into that classroom excited, they're happy to be there, they want to learn, and so we need to capitalize on that motivation. And they take delight in exploring their world and making connections. The degree to which early learning programs support children's delight and wonder in learning reflects the quality of that setting. So educators who engage in DAP practices foster young children's joyful learning and maximize opportunities for each and every child to achieve their full potential. And I really like how they have changed it a little bit to interject the joyful learning experience, and they maximize those opportunities. And that is so important to think about when we are thinking about a developmentally appropriate classroom for kids. We want to make sure that it's engaging and it's fun, because that is how they are wired. Kids are wired to be excited and want to learn, and we need to meet them where they are. So before we start really getting into the practices in the classroom that you might see, we need to back up a bit and discuss the domains of development, because this is important to know, because children, the way that if you know how children develop, then you're able to make appropriate classroom activities for them. So let's go ahead and we'll run over the domains of development a little bit quickly here. We've got cognitive, social, emotional, speech and language, and physical. The first developmental domain is cognitive development, and this involves the thinking and the feeling and processing of a child's brain. It's how the brain works in order to process the information that builds on prior knowledge and connects new learning. So we've heard a little bit about Vygotsky's zone of proximal development, and it's how when we take what they know and build upon that, we're able to enhance their cognitive development. So it's the brain portion of how they grow. And then the next, we need to look at their social development and how this interacts with the cognitive development. And the social piece of it focuses on the interaction a child has with others in their environment. So when a child's born, they instantly start interacting with family members. And then you know, their circle expands into extended family members. And then that circle expands even further into childcare centers and schools and communities. And this focuses on how a child will interact with others in a social context, and you know, if they're shy or if they're outgoing, or just those skills that children learn and how to collaborate and work with other people. The next domain of development is emotional development, and this focuses on how a child feels about themselves on the inside. So it's how they process their feelings and how they regulate those emotions. And in this domain, a child will understand the myriad of feelings a person has and how to respond to each feeling in a healthy way. So a lot of this has to be taught, you know, especially in those preschool years, where they have to be taught when they start to feel angry. They know it's okay to feel angry and it's okay to feel upset and frustrated, but how do we handle that in an appropriate way? And you teach them those skills to learn on how to manage emotionally and socially appropriately. The next one is speech and language, and that focuses on communication, verbal and nonverbal language and literacy development. And then let's see, we have after that, we have the last one, which is the physical development, which is gross and fine motor skills. Now, fine motor skills require more precision and muscle movement, and it's stringing beads would be a great example of, excuse me, fine motor skills. And gross motor skills focus on larger muscle movement. Gross motor skills would be when children are engaging in running, jumping. The large muscle movements is what is required for that. So now that we've looked at that, let's think about how this all works together to create talking and teaching about the whole child. And so in educational literature, it's often talked about making sure we teach the whole child. And so what does that mean? It means that children learn across all developmental domains: physical, social, emotional, cognitive, gross motor. It means that developmental domains are integrated in the learning process for a child. So they're not learning in just one domain. It's all interconnected. This is a reason why it's so important to implement play-based learning experiences for young children. They learn best through play, and because play allows them to explore new ideas when bridging what they already know. So play provides children choices in their learning, and when they have more choices, they are more engaged and interested in what they're doing and learning. Sometimes as educators, we get wrapped up in what they're supposed to be teaching and making sure we cover everything in the curriculum and what we're supposed to do that day. And while this is important, it's equally important to focus on the how children learn. And that is definitely accomplished through play-based activities. So in addition to focusing on play in a DAP environment, we also need to focus on ensuring children learn in an environment where they feel valued and as a member of the classroom. So children's motivation to learn is increased when their learning environment fosters their sense of belonging, purpose, and agency. And the teacher's role is huge in this situation because a positive relationship with the teacher can make a difference in that child's learning experience. So one of the things I want you to remember today is that not only is it important to think about DAP in the classroom, but how DAP applies to each individual child. So while yes, we need to think about the developmentally appropriate classroom in the general sense, more specifically, we need to provide developmentally appropriate instruction for each student. So what developmentally appropriate for one student may not necessarily be what's developmentally appropriate for another student in your same class. So I hope you'll see DAP as in a broad sense for a classroom where you implement age-appropriate tasks and then tweak those DAP practices to suit each individual child's needs. So moving on, we're going to talk a little bit about DAP in the classroom and what that kind of means for you as an educator. And so it means it's based on what we know about how young children learn. It's relevant to children's life's experiences. It's based on the children's current knowledge and abilities. And then it's also making sure that you're respectful of cultural and individual differences in learning styles. Knowing that each child comes to you with a different background and a different story and how that's going to influence their learning. And you need to get to know that child well enough to know where they're coming from so that you can know how to best meet their needs. And then it's also being responsive to the interests and needs of the children. If you know you have a child who's really, really interested in airplanes and they want to learn everything about airplanes, you can use that in their instruction to engage them and to motivate them to learn more. Focus on the learning process and not the end product. So you need to make sure that when you're talking with children, you're praising them for their efforts and you're saying, hey, you worked really hard on that. And I think that is so wonderful that you gave it 100%. And I could tell you were really thinking and you were really trying, as opposed to saying like, wow, you did perfect on that paper. Everything is all correct. And while that may be true, and you might want to mention it, put the focus on the effort rather than on the end result. And then you need to make sure that you're thought-provoking, you're stimulating and challenging the minds of your students and your young children in your classroom. And then based on the philosophy that children are competent and trustworthy and can make good decisions if given the opportunity and practice. So giving them that independence, allowing them to come to conclusions and decisions on their own. So rather than telling them what to go and do, kind of facilitating them to try to get that on their own and start learning how to think for themselves. So some examples for DAP in the classroom. On the left-hand side, you'll see what you would not see in a DAP classroom. And then on the right-hand side is an alternative of what you might see in a DAP classroom. So for example, worksheets as art activities. Now I know that we've all given a kid like a picture of a butterfly to color in, and I'm not saying that that's bad and you shouldn't do that, but that shouldn't be the only thing that they are working on. You should be also giving them open-ended art activities where you give them a blank piece of paper and tons of crayons and markers or whatever you have available, and just allow them to create, give them that experience to use their imagination as opposed to just coloring in the predefined lines. And then rote learning and memorization. So that would be like drilling, the skill and drill that you might hear about. Instead, we need to provide hands-on experiences with real objects. So allowing them to engage in their learning where they're actively interacting with it. And then this one kind of made me smile because it's waiting and lining up. And I think so much of our classroom day is spent like time to line up or time, wait for the other class to go first before we can go in. And so while I know this is in this line of things you wouldn't do, it's also understandable that this is just part of the school day. You're going to be waiting and lining up occasionally, but the point of it is to make sure it's not focused on it. Instead, you're allowing them to build some self-help skills and autonomy. The next one is most activities are teacher directed in large group. While occasionally you might see this here and there, the main focus needs to be small group activities based on interest. You would not see forced participation. You would want to make sure that children are offered choices. So don't make a child read if they don't want to read out loud. Instead have them do something that's a little bit more comfortable, where you can still gain the information that you need from them in a more comfortable environment for them, where they don't feel threatened. Activities with right and wrong outcomes, like I mentioned kind of earlier, make sure you're focusing more on the effort and successful participation. This one was interesting. I thought you might find interesting, is about how the all adult oriented decor. And I know that when I started teaching, I had visions of how my classroom was going to look and how I wanted it to, be, and it was fun. I think as teachers, we all love to decorate our classroom. And so I think that that's certainly fine, but we also need to make sure that we put up tons of their stuff and their drawings and paintings and their work, and show it off and allow them ownership of the room for them, because it's their classroom. So we need to make sure that we focus our shift a little bit on that. And then a DAP classroom is not rigid, it's very flexible, and it is not compliant with the adult is the only choice. Allow them to problem solve and collaborate together. You don't have to tell them this, every single time, this is what you're going to do and this is how you're going to do it. While in certain situations that might be necessary for their safety or for other reasons, but if it can be otherwise, it should be more of a problem solving and collaboration experience for children. And finally, art, music, and science and the other subjects, they don't need to be taught at a certain time. They should instead be integrated. So your art should be integrated with your science if possible, or music integrated with your literacy, and try to integrate as much as possible, because first of all, that's how you're going to be able to cover everything you need to teach. And second of all, it speaks more to how they develop and how they learn. And it's a lot more fun. It's not so boring that way. So some questions to ask yourself is, does the activity allow children to participate on their own level? And then does it allow for flexibility with no right or wrong outcome? Does it encourage active learning through participation, or are you just kind of telling them what to do? Make sure that you're thinking ahead of that they are active participants in their learning. And sometimes that takes some effort and some forethought on your part to do that, but that's the goal. Do you encourage exploration and thinking? Are you asking them questions? Are you making sure that they are taking the time to really soak in what you're trying to teach them, so you're not going too fast and you're not going too slow? And do you allow for socialization and interaction with others? So letting your students work together on group projects. And that's huge, that's part of life, and they're going to need to know those skills as they go through school and through their future careers. So that's an important one to integrate each day. And then, does the activity enable children to learn through their senses? So that means, are they able to truly experience the lesson and digest it in a way to make sure that it really sinks in? And then another couple of questions to ask yourself is, does the activity you're giving students, does it allow children to experience things hands-on? And does it give them choices? And does it foster children's positive feelings about themselves? So those are all things to think about. What might work for one child might not work for another. So you may need to be a little flexible and tweak it to make sure that it provides positive feelings for everybody. Does it respect their individual differences and cultural diversity? And that is making sure that your environment is an equitable one for each child. And this goes back to knowing your students' backgrounds and what their cultural preferences are, and making sure that that is valued and honored in the classroom. Does the activity lend itself to being adapted? And does it acknowledge the physical needs of the children? So this will, the adaptation part of it is extremely important when you have children, not only with special needs, but then just children in general, when they might need extra support in a specific subject, or social emotional doing, maybe they need extra support in that. So making sure that those activities can be adapted to fit a large group of children is very helpful. And then, does it reflect the goals and philosophy of the center? So making sure that you are staying aligned with what your employer values. So in conclusion, developmentally appropriate practice applies to each individual child based on their current developmental needs. So the domains of development are interconnected. And then I want you to try to remember that, because they don't learn just in a physical way. They learn in a physical, in a cognitive, in a social emotional. It all works all together. And so when we recognize that, we're able to provide more play-based experiences where they're able to truly engage in a sensory experience in an integrated way, and focus on both the what and how. So not only do they need to know the letters and the sounds that the letters make, but then how are you going to teach it in a developmental appropriate way? And focus on the what and the how as children learn, to set that foundation for developmentally appropriate practice. And the NAEYC website is filled with lots and lots of information, which is where I got a lot of this from. And it is important to check it, because they are updating it and they change it and they stay current. So when you check with them, your information will be current as well. And so that is all. So if you have any questions, I'll be glad to help.
Sara, would you like to show, or since this is recorded, would you like to share your email with them?
Oh, yes, sure. It is Sara, SARA .McBryde, MCBRYDE at faculty.uagc.edu.
Perfect. Okay, everyone, thank you so much for attending today, and we appreciate you. And if you need anything, reach out.